Hello, friends. Today I am joined by Kerry Beck from How to Homeschool. Kerry, I'm so glad to have you here. I've been on your podcast and you've done a special guest podcast last summer for us, but this is the first time we're actually getting to chat. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and your connection to homeschooling?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm really excited. I love homeschooling. I love talking to homeschool moms and everything, but I actually am finished with my own personal kids. I have three children. They are all adults. We homeschooled for 10 years. I said I would never homeschool. And then life just came around and God's like, nope. And it was the best thing that ever happened. It built such great relationships among my kids, but then in our family as well, because we just had so much more time to spend as a family. So that was cool. Plus, we could pour in our values, our ideas into our kids instead of them being gone all the time. So that was good. Now, I will say this. I am a homeschooler. I am pro homeschool, but I think everyone needs to go to God and find out what He's calling you to. And so, because my youngest Hunter went to a Christian classical school the last 3 years, and it was actually really good because he had male teachers, he had male coaches, he made friends for life. There are two or three friends from those days that they still in their 30s keep up with each other, sort of as accountability partners. So that's why I say I was not ready to let him go, but God said otherwise. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so I say that. So we homeschooled for 10 years. I do have four grandkids. So two of my girls are married. I have two girls and a son. And that's where I feel like I'm sort of coming back around. Not that I'm homeschooling them, but I get to try out and have fun. Doing activities or finding books that we didn't get to read that are new and current. Or I was actually just looking at a bean plant maze, and you put two beans in it, and it's a little house, and you see which one can get to the top the fast and bloom. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we're gonna have to do that with the grandkids. So
That sounds like a perfect grandma adventure. Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like I'm just doing that all over again. I do work with homeschool moms. I have weekly classes that are completely free for homeschool moms. I have courses that we have. We have unit studies. We have all sorts of things that we want to do. We host two events a year. One is Homeschool Superheroes, end of July, and the other is Life Skills Leadership Summit in February. And everything that I do is from a Christian perspective. And I really believe that's what sort of attracts homeschoolers into our groups and into our courses and our classes as well. So that's sort of a quick little nutshell of what I do and what we're all about.
I always love hearing other families and their perspectives. And I always especially love talking to other women who have homeschooled their own kids and now are kind of getting to start seeing the fruit of that with their grandkids. I think it's really encouraging to get that big picture perspective.
I think
Well,
it's true too. And I was going to say, I'm not saying that everything's been perfect too. I think that's really important because we had lots of up and down and I listen to my girls sometimes with one of them has a 6 and an 8 year old. And so they can sort of talk back at them and I'm watching just the way they handle it. And it reminds me that life wasn't completely perfect. And even in homeschooling, I was not our homeschool was not one of those ones that you hear a lot of speakers, oh, my kids just love homeschooling and they just think it's wonderful. And, I'm like, that was not us. We had really good days and we had other days that we did deal with attitude, but I think that's old sin nature and that's just normal. And that's what I loved about it is because we could walk with them and walk with their heart as they got older. They went up and down when they were first on their own as far as Christianity. None of them rejected it, but some of them struggle with walking in that. But now I look at them and they're all walking with God and they're all doing it maybe a little differently, just according to where they are in their season of life. So,
what a joy to see. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's going to encourage moms as they hear. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is this idea about lifelong learning. I feel like this word is thrown around so much in the homeschool world that it almost has ceased to have a little bit of meaning, or people just sort of say it. And then if you ask and like, well, what do you mean by that? They kind of are like, I'm not so sure. So I would like to kind of put you on the spot here and you talk about this idea. Can you tell us what exactly you mean about lifelong learning?
Yes, definitely. I think our society, a lot of people believe, well, you go to school for 12 years and then you're finished and you just go on and that's the end of it. And you go get a job or you go to college and then you go get a job. And I really think God did not put us here to just learn for a little while. He put us here to be able to learn for the rest of our lives. And like I'm 64 years old right now, and I am still learning things. There are things I have learned in the last few years. I'm like, why didn't I learn that in my 20s and 30s? And I'm like, hey, kids. And I know they're going, oh, here goes mom again. But that's one of those things. Actually, I don't really say, hey, kids. I usually just pray about it because I know they don't want to hear it from me. But I do see God answering those prayers. And I think for me, if I wanted to like be methodical with lifetime learning, there are two aspects that we usually teach our moms. One is just a love of learning. There's this curiosity that just continues no matter what goes on. And in my classes, sometimes I'm like, how would you describe a love of learning? And I have a picture of Faith, who is 8 years old now, but she was about 3 years old at the time. And there's a picture of her feeding these chickens. And her parents were going to paint some rooms in the house. And I said, oh, and so I signed her up. We went off to this little farm. They actually had a little Easter egg hunt. And then there were chickens. She held a bunny. She rode a pony for the first time. She rode on a train. She had her face painted, all these things. Now, when she first got there, she was sort of skeptical of it all. But as the day grew on, she was curious about everything. And she would ask why. And we get tired of that question, why? And yet preschoolers and toddlers, especially, they really don't know. Now, sometimes they're procrastinating because they don't want to go to bed. But a lot of times they are asking why because they really don't know. And you have 30 years of experience and you get tired of that. And I understand because you've gone through the whole day and you're just exhausted. But I think we need to be careful and we need to encourage our kids to ask those questions why, to be curious about everything. So sometimes I want to say, look at a preschooler. That is an example of a love of learning. Too often we take that preschooler and we put them at a desk and we give them a stack of books and we go, okay, now it's time to learn. When they've actually been learning all along, it's just more natural learning. And so I think it's important that we encourage our kids to love learning. It's one of our things that we really hammer on with our leadership mom students. And so part of lifetime learning is encouraging that so that they will love learning for a lifetime. The other half of it is giving our kids the tools of learning, because if they don't know how to learn for themselves, how can they learn when they go off and they're adults? What I see, and I don't want to just sit and poo-paw the whole education system, but we put our kids there and it's sort of like a conveyor belt and everyone does the same things. And really for 12 years, the child never takes ownership or leadership of their education. Sometimes they will learn some tools of learning, but do they know? Most of the time they follow and they just do whatever their teacher says. And a lot of homeschool moms bring that into their homeschool. And even as teenagers, their mom is still telling them what to do and they just do it and they don't really think about it and they don't take ownership of their learning. So one of the things we like to teach our moms is there are different tools of learning that you need to be teaching your kids. Obviously, reading and writing, but there are other tools that you can use as well, so that when they go off and they're 37 years old and they need to learn about taxes or they need to learn about, I don't know, how to hang sheetrock or whatever, they can figure it out because they have the tools of learning and know how to solve problems and learn things that they need to learn.
I love that. I love you're talking about just developing that curiosity and wonder, which kind of goes along with my whole perspective on education, which is humility and doxology, this delight in the world that God has made. And then also practically like teaching them how to learn and giving them those tools and that desire to learn on their own. So, as we think about these ideas, are there some specific activities that homeschool moms can be doing to kind of encourage some of these skills and attitudes?
Yeah, I think so. And I really think it starts even at the beginning when they are young, because I think with those toddlers and preschoolers, you can do some fun activities and they get excited about learning. Um, for instance, I was at Easter with one of my kids, obviously on Easter too. We're recording it a few days after Easter. So we were there and they did Stations of the Cross with the kids. So we were talking about which one they liked the best. And the little 6-year-old was like, I like the cross one. And I really don't know exactly what they did. But there was something about walking across the floor, cross and liquid of some sort, and it sort of showed they became cleansed. I don't know if there was like red liquid and it turned clear. There's an object lesson like that. But because there was this hands-on activity, we were able to continue the conversation to talk about, well, we have sin and Jesus died on Good Friday. The blood was the payment for our sins, and that cleanses us from our sins. And yet Jesus is alive. He didn't stay dead. So there are some, I would say object lessons are a great thing that you could do to encourage a love of learning. With young kids, field trips are, I would say really all kids, okay, I don't want to delineate, but field trips are a fun way that you can do that. My kids, even in your own neighborhood, even the field trip of going to the library every week is a good activity. One, to just get you out of the house. But you can go to the fire station, the police station. We have Texas A&M right down the street, and George Bush Library. And we were always going over there for whatever was going on. So you can find local ones. But then we took a field trip. We had been doing American history. And so we went to Williamsburg, and we went to Williamsburg, Yorktown, and Jamestown. And they had already spent a year learning about it. And it was actually, we drove over there. We found an inexpensive hotel. It was not just as expensive as you might think, but it was a way that they could dive into living history. And so there are some things that you could do. And there are things usually within an hour or two that you could find nearby. Another thing, that if you have boys, I would encourage you to use games. My son would learn anything if we turned it into a game. He did not like fine arts at all when he was a kid. And so, but we were leaving Nashville. We'd gone to the Parthenon. I have relatives up in Nashville. And so I bought this fine arts game. And on the way home back to Texas, we played that fine arts game. Well, Hunter could care less about fine art, but he learned every single piece because he wanted to win and beat his sisters. And so I just learned that boys are usually competitive, and that is a fun way to do it. Like, I don't know about, by the time you listen to it, it may be gone. But like right now, there are all those plastic Easter eggs at the store on discount. You can actually make your own matching games. If they're young, you can put a capital A and a lowercase a, and they have to match them all up. You could put 26 or maybe 50 letters out, and you could do spelling with plastic eggs. Wouldn't your kids, instead of just writing it out or taking your spelling test, get an egg carton and call out the words, and they have to find the eggs to do that. And if you don't have plastic eggs, go get Legos or something. And if you don't want to write on the Legos, put little masking tape, and you can put letters all the way down. Another thing we've done is actually take memory verses and write phrases of it on Legos. They have to get it in the right order, and they stack it up and down. Those are fun things. Yes, it takes a little bit of time and effort, but I have found that my kids' attitude is a lot better if we throw some fun activities in as well. So those would be things, lower grades. As they get older, I mentioned this earlier, one of the things I think is really important, especially teenagers, they need to take ownership. So one of the activities you can do, Mom, is to let go and quit doing so much. And one of the things we did for our kids, and I believe this is a tool of learning, it didn't necessarily specifically things that we teach. But my kids have all told me they are so thankful. What we would do is when they started, say, a freshman in high school, on Mondays, I would meet with them. And instead of me writing down their lesson plan, little spreadsheet chart, they wrote it down. And we had already talked, they made decisions about what courses they were going to take. And then every Monday, we would plan out their week together. By January, they could pretty much do it on their own. This allows them to take leadership and ownership in their education, and they're not completely dependent on you anymore. And really, by sophomore year, they were on their own. Now, we had a humanities class that was required, and after that, our kids made some decisions. And some of y'all would go, really? Like Ashley did not finish, that's my oldest, Algebra 2. And she still got a college degree. She had a teaching certificate to teach at-risk kids in Texas. She never took an SAT, she never took an ACT, but she has a college degree. And so we gave them that freedom. Ashley and Gentry both wanted to take astronomy and science. And so we found an online one. The guy actually was about 30 minutes away, and they could go out to his farm a few times during the semester, and he would point out, the constellations and different astronomical beings. So we let them make decisions like that. Gentry wanted to go to a 4-year full college, and she did not like math, but she knew she had to get a certain amount of math to be able to do that. So we let them make decisions instead of mom and dad making all those decisions, especially with those older kids.
Yeah, that's so important. And I know that in my own experience, by the time I was an adult, I so valued the ability I had to figure out how to manage my time and manage my to-do list and keep track of things. And so that came a lot more easily than it did to some of my peers who had always had everything just laid out for them in the classroom or by their parents. Yeah. Well, what do you think?
Good. I will say one thing. I still remember Gentry driving to my parents. It was just the two of us. And she said exactly what you said. I mean, I know you were homeschooled, but she was like, Mom, thank you so much. None of my friends were prepared to go to college and they don't know what they're doing half the time. So anyway, same story.
I have a sophomore in high school this year who is taking a college class, has taken a few this year. And just recently her classmates found out that she's just a high schooler, doesn't even have her driver's license yet. And she's sort of like leading the group projects, keeping everyone on track. And they were completely blown away. They were like, what? You're only in high school?
Yeah.
It's like, yes. Well, what do you think is the connection between this idea about lifelong learning and the concept of leadership? Because we desperately need strong, godly, humble leaders, and that's what we want our children to be. Do you think these ideas are connected?
Yeah, I definitely do. And before I talk about the connection, I would like to make a little definition of what leader or leadership is, because I've had some people go, well, my kid's not going to be CEO, or they're not going to be president or mayor or whatever. But I think we need to say leadership is just influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's a quote by John Maxwell, who's written many leadership books, and he does it from a Christian perspective. But I think we are all going to have influence. And so it may not be big wig in a company or big wig in the country or whatever. The other thing I think is important to realize is I would say 99% of our kids are going to grow up to be dads and moms, and they are going to need to be able to lead their family well. So I guess I want to start with that, because some people don't always see the value of the leadership education. And yet we do need to raise our kids to be able to, if you don't want to use the word lead, then to influence and impact for Jesus Christ. And that's really what I think is all about. Like, we teach we have moms that are looking at how do we give our kids a Christian leadership education? And it really starts with influencing and showing them how their kids will grow up and be able to influence for Jesus Christ. So I definitely think so, because I believe leaders need to be learners. Sometimes I'll say leaders or readers. And I think that's true. Some people would actually argue with me and go, well, sometimes you can just learn on a podcast. That may be true. But I would say leaders of big organizations usually have bigger libraries than their TV. Now, some of them are probably wealthy and have a giant TV. but they usually always have a big library. I know that all three of my kids are leaders in different areas, and we actually share leadership podcast. And I didn't know where they would land, and they still have years probably to live and what will go on with them. But it's really interesting, and it's fun to actually be able to talk about how do we become even a better leader of whatever group they are over. So I do think it's important that we raise our kids to learn, because as a leader, the foundation, I think, of leadership education is godly character. And you can begin that at birth. And you're working on building biblical godly character. Why? Because leaders are going to need to work on relationship skills. They need to manage people. They will need to solve problems and have perseverance. There is just a wealth of information and things that happen when we build godly character. And then we move into our academics of love of learning, tools of learning, and our critical thinking skills as well. So I do think the relationship mostly is just leaders are always growing. They are always learning. And to be able to influence, sometimes we have to learn new skills as well as adults.
Well, Kerry, you've already made such a good argument and perspective on why this matters, why it's important, even for young children. I would love to hear if you have any more to say about that, but also tell parents about the live workshop you have going on and what resources you have to help them raise children to be godly leaders.
Sure. I do believe, I will just tell you, there's one other thought that just sort of crossed my mind. I do believe some people are like, well, I don't need to worry about leadership. My kid's 4 years old. And yet, if we look at it and we look at the different aspects, it does begin with character. And then it moves to love of learning, tools of learning, and biblical critical thinking. But the one thing I just sort of thought about is it also starts with mom. And one of the activities I did not share is moms, you are modeling something. And so if you are not modeling a love of learning yourself, if you're not using the tools of learning, if you don't have biblical thinking or godly character, you need to go back and work on you more than anything. Now, we're all works in progress with God. I understand that. But, we say our kids they've got a bad attitude. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's because your face is in front of the phone all the time. And you're telling them, you're modeling that the phone is more important than learning. Do they ever see you reading a book? And so you are modeling something. What are you modeling? And so I would really encourage moms, you need to start with your own education and get off the conveyor belt. Probably not all people like Amy were homeschooled earlier, but most of my homeschool moms I work with are having to get away from that public school mentality. And so we need to educate ourselves in order to raise our kids to be leaders as well. And that is one thing that we do. I have a class that we give a few times a year. When this is being published, we will be having some live classes, and it's called 4 Steps to Raising Christian Leaders. So we'll talk about the 4 steps, and I'll give some more practical ideas as well. We'll go a little deeper in what Christian leadership education is, completely free. If you can't go to the live class or you hear about this after the live class has already happened, go on and sign up, because we will have a replay as well. And so you'll be able to access that replay. And we made a quick little link. It's just my website's howtohomeschoolmychild.com. So howtohomeschoolmychild.com/Amy Sloan, and that will take you to the registration page for the free class that you can sign up for.
Perfect. And I will also have that link in the show notes for this episode. So wherever you're listening or watching, you can just swipe down and click directly if you were driving and didn't have a chance to write that one down. Kerry, this has been great. I know it will be an encouragement to many homeschool parents. Here at the end, I'm going to ask you the questions that I ask all my guests. And the first is just, what are you personally reading lately?
I know. I was thinking about that. Like this very moment, last night I was reading business secrets from the Bible. I read business books. I read novels. I read education books, but right now I'm reading a business book, and it's actually very interesting. And there's so many things from the Bible we don't even realize, because I run a business, and I thought, I'll just see what this guy has to say. I do like novels. One of my new authors is Sarah Ladd. She's a Christian author. I don't always read, not everything I read is just Christian, but it's been really good. And she is set in Regency, like England time period. And it's just interesting because to me it's a combination of history and romance and mystery. I've read, I think, 3 of her novels, and my sister introduced me to her when she gave me one of her books for Christmas, and so I really enjoyed those books as well.
Oh, how fun. I have some girls who love Pride and Prejudice and just recently went to an English country dance, kind of Regency style dances. So they would probably enjoy these stories too. Well, the final question is just, what is your best tip for helping the homeschool day run smoothly?
I would say, I don't even know that I can narrow it all down. One, be flexible and know it's not going to be perfect. And that's part of it. But I also think take time to prepare. I know we can't always prepare, but one of the best things for me is I did carve out time for our schedule most of the time on Sunday evenings, because my kids went to Awanas and I had some time by myself. That may not be for you, but it was just an hour or two that I could really focus and get ready for the week. Now, obviously, when they got older, they were planning it themselves, and that was part of school on Monday. But I think, I mean, that's even true in the classroom. I was a classroom teacher for 6 years. The more prepared you are, the easier it is. If you're sitting down with your kids and trying to figure out what you're going to do, they are going to lose it, and you're going to lose their attention, and they are not going to know what they're going to do. So I would say prepare, be flexible, and if you don't finish something, don't beat yourself up. Just keep it going the next day. I was a Labor Day to Memorial Day homeschooler, and whatever we didn't finish in Memorial Day, we just picked up on Labor Day. Did they quit learning over the summer? No, we kept reading, and they kept reading, and we did fun things. But we were in the middle of Rome one year, and we just picked it up. They could be in the middle of Algebra 1, and we just picked it up in Labor Day.
Yeah, I love that freedom that homeschool provides for us. And especially here at the end of the spring semester when moms are looking, oh no, we haven't finished the textbook. Hear it loud and clear. You don't have to finish right now. You can either just let it go and start something fresh next year or pick up where you left off. That's the joy of homeschooling. Well, Kerry, where can people find you all around the internet?
Well, my website is howtohomeschoolmychild.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. And if you just, I would say, Facebook, How to Homeschool My Child. We have a group and we have a page, and that's the exact name. And Instagram at How to Homeschool My Child, Pinterest, How to Homeschool, and YouTube. YouTube's probably one of those funky ones. But if you get to my website, howtohomeschoolmychild.com, there are little buttons and you can find me from there.
Perfect. And I'll have all those links in the show notes as well for this episode. Thank you guys for listening to Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology. I would love for you to share this episode or any others of your favorites with a friend. And while you're here, go ahead and leave a rating and review and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you.